In the quiet suburb of Bellevue, just outside Seattle, the morning mist clung to the manicured lawns of sprawling mansions where wealth whispered through iron gates and ivy-covered walls. Elena Torres pushed a double stroller down the winding path toward the Harper estate, her heart a mix of hope and exhaustion. At 25, she was a single mother to 4-month-old twins, Jacob and Noah, whose soft coos and occasional cries were the soundtrack of her life. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight ponytail, and her worn sneakers crunched against the gravel as she approached the grand oak doors of the mansion. This was her second week working as a housekeeper for Dr. Daniel Harper, a renowned surgeon whose name was etched on hospital plaques across the city. The job was a lifeline steady pay, a chance to keep her boys close, and a roof over their heads after months of scraping by in a cramped apartment. But the weight of her responsibilities pressed hard against her chest, and the mansion with its polished floors and crystal chandeliers felt like a world she could never belong to. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish and old money, a stark contrast to the musty shelters she'd known before. Elena maneuvered the stroller into the foyer, careful not to let the wheels mark the gleaming hardwood. She glanced at her boys, Jacob, with his curious brown eyes, and Noah already dozing with a tiny fist curled near his mouth. "We're going to be okay, little ones," she whispered, brushing a finger across Noah's cheek. Her job was simple: keep the house spotless, stay invisible, and ensure her babies didn't disturb the doctor's peace. Daniel had been clear when he hired her. "This is my sanctuary, Elena. I work long hours, and I need quiet when I'm home." She'd nodded. Promising to blend into the background, her boys tucked away in a corner of the kitchen or the small guest room where she changed their diapers between tasks. So far, she'd managed to keep her word moving like a shadow through the house, dusting shelves, scrubbing counters, and folding linens with a precision born of necessity. But today, as she began her morning routine, she felt eyes on her sharp, unyielding like a hawk, circling prey. Evelyn Moore, the Harper family's housekeeper of 15 years, stood in the doorway of the living room, her graying hair pulled into a severe bun, her lips pressed into a thin line. Evelyn was a fixture in the house, a woman in her late 40s, whose efficiency was matched only by her cold formality. She wore a starched apron over a navy dress, and her hands, rough from years of work, clasped a clipboard as she watched Elena wipe down a mahogany sideboard. "You missed a spot?" Evelyn said, her voice clipped, pointing to an imaginary smudge. Elena forced a smile, nodding as she rubbed the already spotless wood. "Sorry, Ms. Moore. I'll get it." Evelyn didn't respond, her gaze lingering on the stroller parked near the fireplace, where Jacob was chewing on a rattle. "Those children," she said, her tone flat, but laced with something darker. "They're awfully noisy for such a big house." Elena's stomach tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "They're usually quiet, ma'am. Just teething a bit today." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, and she turned away, her heels clicking on the floor as she disappeared into the hall. Elena exhaled, her hands trembling as she resumed her work. She didn't know why Evelyn seemed to dislike her, but the woman's presence made the mansion feel smaller, colder, like a storm cloud hovering just out of sight. As the morning wore on, Elena moved to the grand living room where a collection of family heirlooms adorned the shelves, a crystal vase, a set of antique books, and a delicate silver bracelet that once belonged to Daniel's mother. Elena dusted around it carefully, knowing its value from the way Daniel had mentioned it during her orientation. "That bracelet stays on that shelf. It's irreplaceable." She'd nodded, committing the rule to memory, her fingers never grazing the precious item. By noon, the twins were hungry, their soft whimpers escalating into full-blown cries. Elena hurried to the kitchen, a spacious room with marble counters and stainless steel appliances and prepared their bottles with practiced ease. She sat on a stool feeding Jacob, while Noah fussed in the stroller, his little legs kicking. "Shh, my love, you're next," she murmured, her heart aching at their impatience. She didn't notice Daniel enter until his shadow fell across the counter. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice low and warm, a contrast to the sterile precision of the house. Elena startled, nearly dropping the bottle. "Oh, Dr. Harper, I'm so sorry. They're just hungry. I'll keep them quiet." Daniel, in his late 30s, had a presence that filled the room, tall with dark hair, streaked with early gray, and eyes that seemed to see more than they let on. He wore a tailored suit, his tie loosened after a morning at the hospital. "No need to apologize," he said, his gaze softening as he looked at the twins. "They're growing fast, aren't they?" Elena nodded, a shy smile breaking through her nerves. "They are." Jacob's starting to babble, and Noah's already trying to roll over. Daniel crouched beside the stroller, his face lighting up as Jacob reached for his finger. "Strong grip," he said, chuckling. "You've got your hands full, Elena." She laughed softly, the sound foreign in the quiet house. "I manage." For a moment their eyes met, and Elena felt a warmth she hadn't expected, a connection, however fleeting, that made her feel seen. But the moment shattered when Evelyn's voice cut through from the doorway. "Dr. Harper, your lunch is ready in the dining room," she said, her tone sharp, her eyes flicking between Daniel and Elena. Daniel stood, brushing off his knees. "Thank you, Evelyn. I'll be right there." As he left, Evelyn lingered her stare, pinning Elena to the spot. "You should focus on your work," she said, her voice low. "This isn't a nursery." Elena swallowed her retort, nodding as she turned back to Noah, who was now sucking contentedly on his bottle. The rest of the day passed in a blur of chores, vacuuming rugs, polishing silver, and scrubbing bathrooms while keeping the twins calm. By late afternoon, Elena was exhausted, her back aching from carrying Noah while pushing the stroller with one hand. She was in the living room again, wiping down the shelves, when she noticed something odd. The silver bracelet was gone. Her heart stopped. She checked the shelf again, her fingers brushing the empty space where the heirloom had been that morning. "No, no, no," she whispered, panic rising. She'd been so careful, hadn't she? She glanced at the twins asleep in their stroller, and then around the room searching for any sign of the bracelet. It couldn't have just disappeared. Before she could think further, Evelyn stormed in her face, a mask of fury. "What did you do?" she hissed, grabbing Elena's arm and yanking her toward the shelf. "Where's the bracelet?" Elena's voice shook. I don't know. It was here this morning, when I dusted." Evelyn's laugh was cold-cutting. "Don't play innocent with me. I saw you eyeing it earlier. You think you can just take what doesn't belong to you." The twins stirred Jacob's cry, piercing the air. Elena pulled free, rushing to soothe him. "Ms. Moore, I swear I didn't touch it. I'd never." "Enough!" Evelyn snapped, her eyes blazing. "You're coming with me." Before Elena could protest, Evelyn seized her arm again, dragging her toward a small storage room off the laundry area, a cramped space filled with cleaning supplies and old furniture. Elena clutched the stroller, her heart pounding as Evelyn pushed her inside. "You'll stay here until Dr. Harper gets home and deals with this," Evelyn said, slamming the door and turning the lock. The click echoed like a gunshot. Inside the dim room, lit only by a flickering bulb, Elena sank to the floor, pulling the stroller close. Jacob and Noah were crying now, their wails amplified by the confined space. "Shh, my babies, it's okay," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes as she rocked them. The air was thick with the smell of bleach and dust, and the cold tile seeped through her jeans. Her mind raced. How could the bracelet have vanished? She'd dusted the shelf that morning, careful as always, and no one else had been in the room. Or had they? Evelyn's hostility wasn't new, but this felt different, calculated. Elena's thoughts were interrupted by Noah's hungry cry. She fumbled with a bottle, her hands shaking as she fed him Jacob still fussing in her lap. "Mama's here," she murmured, her voice cracking. She couldn't let panic win, not for her boys, but the fear gnawed at her. What if Daniel believed Evelyn? The older woman had been with him for years, trusted, indispensable. Elena was just the new hire, a single mother with no one to vouch for her. The hours dragged on, the twins' cries ebbing and flowing as Elena sang softly to calm them, her voice trembling through old lullabies her mother had taught her. She thought of the day she'd interviewed with Daniel, how he'd seemed kind but distant, his life consumed by work. She'd promised to be invisible, to keep the house as his sanctuary, but now she was locked in a storage room, accused of theft. The injustice burned, but so did her resolve. She hadn't survived childbirth alone, hadn't clawed her way through poverty to let someone like Evelyn destroy her. Outside, Evelyn paced the living room, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. She'd watched Daniel that morning, the way his eyes softened when he looked at Elena's twins, the way he lingered in the kitchen longer than necessary. It wasn't right. For 15 years she'd kept this house running, been the one constant in Daniel's life. After his parents passed, after his failed engagement, after every late-night surgery, when he came home to her perfectly prepared meals. She'd never asked for more than his trust. But deep down she'd hoped, dreamed, that one day he'd see her, really see her. Not as the housekeeper, but as a woman. And now, this girl, this nobody with 2 screaming babies, was stealing that dream. Evelyn glanced at the shelf where she'd hidden the bracelet earlier that day, slipping it into her apron pocket, while Elena was busy with the twins. It was a risk, but a necessary one. Daniel needed to see Elena for what she was, a threat, a gold digger, someone who didn't belong in his world. Evelyn's heart twisted with guilt, but she pushed it down. This was for his own good. By the time Daniel's car pulled into the driveway at 6:00 p.m., the mansion was quiet, save for the muffled cries from the storage room. Evelyn smoothed her apron, practicing her story she'd caught Elena near the shelf, acting suspicious, and when she checked, the bracelet was gone. It was perfect, airtight. Daniel would have to believe her. As he stepped through the door, his briefcase in hand, Evelyn greeted him with a practiced frown. "Dr. Harper." "Thank goodness you're home," she said, her voice heavy with concern. "Something terrible has happened." Daniel's brow furrowed, his eyes scanning the foyer. "What is it? Where's Elena?" Evelyn sighed, clasping her hands. "It's about her, sir. The silver bracelet, your mother's, it's gone. I saw her near the shelf this morning, looking at it strangely. When I asked what she was doing, she got nervous, stammering. And now it's missing." Daniel's face darkened. "Missing, are you sure?" Evelyn nodded, leading him to the living room. "I checked the shelf myself. It was there this morning, and now it's not. I had to lock her in the storage room she was trying to leave with the children." Daniel's jaw tightened, and he ran a hand through his hair. "She's locked in there. With the twins." Evelyn hesitated, sensing his disapproval. "I didn't know what else to do, sir. I couldn't let her run off with your mother's bracelet." Daniel's eyes flicked to the empty shelf, then back to Evelyn. "Where's the key?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Evelyn handed it over, her confidence wavering. As Daniel strode toward the storage room, he heard the twins' cries, faint but unmistakable, and something in his chest tightened. He'd only known Elena for 2 weeks, but she'd been nothing but diligent, kind, and fiercely protective of her boys. Could she really have stolen from him? He reached the door, the key cold in his hand, and paused, listening to Elena's soft, trembling voice singing to her children. "Hush, my loves, we'll be okay," she whispered, her words barely audible over Jacob's sobs. Daniel's hand hovered over the lock, doubt and trust warring in his mind. Whatever the truth, he couldn't let two infants and their mother stay trapped in there a moment longer. The storage room door creaked open, and the dim light from the hallway spilled across the cold tile floor, where Elena Torres sat cradling her 4-month-old twins, Jacob and Noah. Their cries softened as they sensed the change, but Elena's tear-streaked face lifted with a mix of relief and dread as Dr. Daniel Harper stepped inside. His tall frame filled the doorway, his suit rumpled from a long day at the hospital, his dark eyes searching hers. "Elena, are you okay?" he asked, his voice low but urgent. She nodded, her throat tight as she rocked Noah, whose tiny hands clutched her shirt. "Dr. Harper, I didn't take the bracelet. I swear on my boys' lives I'd never." Her voice broke, and she swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay strong for her children. Jacob whimpered, and she shifted him gently in her lap. Daniel crouched beside her, his gaze flicking to the twins, then back to her. "I believe you," he said, though a shadow of doubt lingered in his tone, betraying the conflict in his mind. He reached out, hesitating before taking Jacob from her arms. The baby quieted, nestling against his chest, and Daniel's expression softened. "Let's get you out of here." Elena stood, her legs shaky from hours on the floor, and pushed the stroller into the hallway, where Evelyn Moore stood waiting. Her arms crossed her face, a mask of righteous indignation. "Dr. Harper? I'm so sorry it came to this," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with false concern. "I couldn't let her leave with your mother's bracelet." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he kept his focus on Elena. "Evelyn, we'll talk later. Right now, Elena needs to take care of her kids." Evelyn's lips pursed, but she stepped aside as Daniel guided Elena to the kitchen. The spacious room with its gleaming appliances and marble counters felt like a sanctuary after the claustrophobic storage room. Elena settled the twins in their stroller, checking their diapers and soothing them with soft whispers. Daniel watched his hands in his pockets, his mind clearly racing. "Tell me what happened," he said, finally, his tone measured. Elena took a deep breath, recounting her day, dusting the living room, feeding the twins, noticing the bracelet's absence, and Evelyn's sudden accusation. "I was careful, Dr. Harper. I know how much that bracelet means to you. I didn't touch it." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her fear of losing this job, of losing the fragile stability she'd built for her boys. Daniel nodded, his gaze drifting to the empty shelf in the living room, visible through the open doorway. "Evelyn says she saw you near the shelf acting suspicious." Elena's heart sank. "I was dusting like always. I didn't do anything wrong." Her voice cracked, and she looked down at Noah, who was sucking on his pacifier. "Please, you have to believe me." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his face etched with uncertainty. He'd known Evelyn for 15 years. She'd been the backbone of his household, loyal through every crisis. But Elena, in just 2 weeks, had brought something new to his life. Warmth, resilience, the soft chaos of her twins that somehow made his sterile mansion feel like a home. "I need to figure this out," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Stay here tonight. Use the guest room. I'll handle this." Elena nodded, too exhausted to argue, though the sting of his doubt cut deep. She gathered her boys and retreated to the small guest room, where she fed them, changed them, and tucked them into a borrowed crib. As she lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind churned. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not with rent due, not with formula and diapers eating up every paycheck. But more than that, she couldn't bear the thought of Daniel thinking she was a thief. She'd seen the way he looked at her boys, the way his smile softened when Jacob grabbed his finger. There was something there, something she didn't dare name, and Evelyn's accusations threatened to shatter it. In the living room, Daniel sat across from Evelyn, the silver bracelet's absence like a ghost between them. "Tell me again," he said, his voice calm but probing. "What exactly did you see?" Evelyn straightened her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I was checking the linens in the hall when I saw her lingering by the shelf. She kept looking at the bracelet, touching it, like she was thinking about taking it. When I asked what she was doing, she got flustered, said she was just cleaning, but I checked later and it was gone." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "And you're sure it was there this morning?" "Positive," Evelyn said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I dusted the shelf myself yesterday." Daniel leaned back, his mind racing. Evelyn's story was plausible, but something didn't sit right. He'd caught glimpses of her sharpness toward Elena, the way her tone turned icy when the twins cried. And Elena, she'd been nothing but honest, her every action driven by love for her children. He stood, pacing the room. "I'll look into it tomorrow. For now, let's all get some rest." Evelyn nodded, but as she left for her quarters, a flicker of unease crossed her face. She'd hidden the bracelet in her room, tucked inside a drawer beneath a stack of aprons. It was a bold move, but necessary. Daniel needed to see Elena's true colors, or at least the colors Evelyn wanted him to see. The next morning, Elena woke to the twins' soft coos, her body aching from a restless night. She dressed them in clean onesies, her hands moving on autopilot as she prepared their bottles. The kitchen was quiet, the early light filtering through the windows, casting long shadows across the counters. She was stirring formula when Daniel appeared, his face drawn, as if he hadn't slept either. "Morning," he said, pouring himself coffee. "How are the boys?" "They're okay," Elena replied, her voice guarded. "Just hungry, as usual." Daniel watched her, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided his gaze. "Elena, I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. I don't think you're a thief, but I need to be sure." Her heart twisted, the words cutting deeper than she expected. "You don't think I'm a thief, but you're not sure I'm not." She set the bottle down, her hands trembling. "Dr. Harper, I've got nothing but my word. And my boys. If that's not enough, maybe I shouldn't be here." Daniel's chest tightened. "That's not what I meant. Evelyn's been with me for years. I have to hear her out." Elena nodded, her eyes glistening. "I understand, but I can't stay where I'm not trusted." She turned back to the twins, her focus on them, but her words hung heavy in the air. Daniel left for the hospital, his mind a storm of conflicting thoughts. At his office between surgeries, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through the security app connected to the mansion's cameras. He hadn't checked them before. Evelyn had always handled the system, but now he wondered if they'd caught anything. The footage from the living room was grainy, showing Elena dusting the shelf, her movements careful, deliberate. She never touched the bracelet. But later, another figure appeared, Evelyn pausing by the shelf, her hand lingering before she walked away. The timestamp was just after Elena had left to feed the twins. Daniel's pulse quickened. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was enough to make him question Evelyn's story. He needed more. That afternoon, as Elena cleaned the dining room, keeping the twins nearby in their stroller, she noticed Evelyn's phone on the counter, left unattended. It buzzed, and the screen lit up with a text. "Spread the word about the new girl. Make it believable." The sender was listed as Marge, a name Elena didn't recognize. Her stomach churned. Was Evelyn plotting something bigger? She didn't touch the phone, didn't want to give Evelyn more ammunition, but the message burned into her memory. When Daniel returned that evening, Elena was in the kitchen feeding Noah while Jacob played with a rattle. She looked up, her face pale. "Dr. Harper, I saw something today. On Evelyn's phone. A text about spreading rumors about me." Daniel's eyes widened. "What did it say?" She repeated the message, her voice steady, despite the fear in her eyes. Daniel pulled out his own phone, his fingers hovering over the screen. "I checked the cameras," he admitted. "You didn't touch the bracelet, but Evelyn was near the shelf after you left." Elena's breath caught. "So you believe me?" "I'm starting to," he said, his voice heavy. "But I need to confront her. If she's lying, I need to know why." That night, Daniel called Evelyn into his study, the room lined with medical journals and family photos. She stood stiffly, her hands clasped. "Evelyn?" "I saw the security footage," he said, his tone calm but firm. "You were by the shelf after Elena. And now there's a text on your phone about spreading rumors. Care to explain?" Evelyn's face paled, but she recovered quickly. "Dr. Harper, I don't know what you're talking about. I was checking the shelf to make sure everything was in place. And my phone, someone must have sent that by mistake." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "A mistake. That's convenient." Evelyn's voice sharpened. "Sir, I've been loyal to you for 15 years. That girl, she's trouble. Single mothers like her, they'll do anything for a paycheck for stability. You're too kind to see it." Daniel's patience snapped. "Enough, Evelyn. I'm not accusing you yet. But I'm watching. And if I find out you're lying, you're done here." Evelyn nodded, her lips tight, and left the room. But as she climbed the stairs to her quarters, her heart raced. She'd underestimated Daniel's protectiveness, his growing attachment to Elena. The bracelet was still hidden in her drawer, a ticking bomb she couldn't undo. She needed to act fast before Daniel dug deeper. The next day, Elena arrived in the kitchen to find Evelyn already there, scrubbing the counters with a ferocity that made the air tense. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Evelyn hissed, her eyes cold. "Telling him about my phone. You're playing a dangerous game." Elena stood her ground, her voice low. "I'm not playing anything, Ms. Moore. I just want to do my job and take care of my boys." Evelyn's laugh was bitter. "Your boys? That's your ticket, isn't it? Those kids making him feel sorry for you." Elena's hands clenched, but she didn't respond, turning instead to feed Jacob. She wouldn't let Evelyn bait her, but the words stung, feeding her fear that Daniel's doubt would never fully fade. That evening, as Elena prepared to leave for the guest room, Daniel stopped her in the hallway. "Elena, wait," he said, his voice softer than before. "I'm sorry about yesterday. I'm trying to trust you, but I need time to sort this out." Elena looked at him, her heart heavy. "I get it, Dr. Harper, but I can't stay where I'm not wanted. If you don't believe me by tomorrow, I'm leaving. For my boy's sake." Daniel watched her walk away, the twin stroller rolling softly behind her, and felt a pang he couldn't name. He didn't want her to leave, not just because she was a good worker, but because her presence, her strength, had started to mean something to him. He thought of the twins, their innocent smiles, and the way Elena's eyes lit up when she talked about them. He couldn't let her go without knowing the truth. Late that night, unable to sleep, Daniel sat in his study replaying the security footage. He froze the frame on Evelyn's hand near the shelf, her movements too deliberate to be innocent. Then he checked his phone, pulling up the mansion's cloud storage where older footage was archived. He found a clip from the previous week, Evelyn alone in the living room staring at the bracelet with an intensity that chilled him. He didn't have proof yet, but the pieces were falling into place. Evelyn was hiding something, and he was determined to find out what. Meanwhile, in the guest room, Elena lay awake, the twins asleep beside her. She thought of her boy's father, who'd left her 8 months pregnant, his note cold and final. "I can't do this, Elena. You're on your own." She'd survived then, and she'd survive now. But as she listened to Jacob's soft breaths, she wondered if staying was worth the fight. Daniel's kindness, his moments of warmth had sparked something in her, a hope she hadn't felt in years. But if he couldn't trust her, that hope was nothing but a cruel mirage. Tomorrow she'd decide stay and fight, or walk away for good. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Julia's small apartment in Renton, a 20-minute drive from the Harper Mansion in Bellevue. Elena Torres sat on a worn couch, her 4-month-old twins Jacob and Noah cooing in their double stroller beside her. Her eyes were red from a sleepless night, her bags packed and tucked in a corner, a silent testament to her decision to leave Daniel Harper's employ. The sting of his doubt, his hesitation to fully believe her over Evelyn Moore's accusations, had cut deeper than she'd expected. She'd spent the night replaying his words, "I'm trying to trust you," and each time they felt like a betrayal. Julia, her friend since high school, handed her a mug of coffee, her brow furrowed with concern. "Elena, you sure about this? You're walking away from a good job. What's next?" Elena's fingers tightened around the mug, the warmth grounding her. "I don't know, Julia, but I can't stay where I'm not trusted. My boys deserve better than that." Noah gurgled, reaching for a rattle, and Elena's heart ached at the thought of uprooting them again. She'd survived worse months of scraping by after their father left nights in shelters with 2 newborns, but the idea of losing the fragile stability she'd found at Daniel's made her chest tight. Back at the mansion, Daniel sat in his study, the security footage paused on his laptop screen, showing Evelyn's hand lingering near the shelf, where his mother's silver bracelet had vanished. His jaw clenched as he dialed a number he'd found online. Richard Klein, a private investigator based in Seattle. "Mr. Klein, I need you to look into someone," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the storm in his mind. "My housekeeper, Evelyn Moore. I think she's framing another employee." Klein's voice was gruff professional. "Got a name, address? Any specifics?" Daniel provided what he could. Evelyn's full name, her years of service, and the suspicious text Elena had seen on her phone. "It'll cost $2,500 up front, plus expenses," Klein said. "I can have something in a week." Daniel agreed without hesitation. He needed answers not just for the bracelet, but for the growing unease in his gut. Evelyn had been loyal for 15 years, but her sharpness toward Elena, her quickness to accuse, didn't add up. And Elena, her quiet strength, the way she cared for her twins had stirred something in him he couldn't ignore. He didn't want her to leave, but he needed proof to make things right. At Julia's apartment, Elena was feeding Jacob when her phone buzzed. It was Daniel. "Elena, please, don't go yet," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "I hired an investigator to look into Evelyn. I saw the footage. She was near the shelf after you. I think you're telling the truth." Elena's breath caught hope warring with caution. "Why didn't you believe me before?" There was a pause, and she could almost see him running a hand through his dark gray-streaked hair. "I wanted to, but Evelyn's been with me so long. I had to be sure. Please, come back to the house. Stay in the guest room until we sort this out." Elena looked at her boys, their innocent faces grounding her. "I'll think about it," she said, hanging up. Julia raised an eyebrow. "You're actually considering it?" Elena sighed. "He's trying, Julia, and I need this job. But if he doubts me again, I'm gone." By noon, Elena returned to the mansion, her bags and stroller in tow. Evelyn greeted her at the door, her smile tight, her eyes cold. "Back so soon," she said, her tone laced with mockery. "Dr. Harper insisted," Elena replied, keeping her voice even as she pushed past the twins, babbling softly. The mansion felt different now, its grandeur tainted by suspicion. Elena kept her distance from Evelyn, focusing on her tasks, polishing silver, vacuuming rugs, and tending to Jacob and Noah. But the tension was palpable, like a storm brewing in the quiet halls. Evelyn, meanwhile, was unraveling. She'd seen Daniel's expression in the study, the way he'd questioned her about the footage. She'd hidden the bracelet well, but the text to Marge, her cousin, who worked as a maid in a neighboring estate, had been careless. She needed to escalate her plan before Daniel dug deeper. That afternoon, while Elena was in the laundry room, Evelyn slipped into the study and used the house phone to make an anonymous call. "Hello, Child Protective Services," she said, lowering her voice. "I'm reporting neglect at the Harper residence in Bellevue. There's a housekeeper, Elena Torres, with 2 infants. They're left alone for hours, crying, not properly cared for." She hung up quickly, her heart pounding. If Daniel wouldn't fire Elena for theft, maybe he'd see her as unfit to work with children in his home. The next day, a CPS worker arrived at the mansion, a stern woman named Linda Carter. Daniel was at the hospital, leaving Elena to face her alone. "Ms. Torres, we received a report about your children," Linda said, her clipboard in hand. "May I see where they're kept during the day?" Elena's stomach dropped, but she led Linda to the kitchen where Jacob and Noah were in their stroller, clean and content after a feeding. "They're always with me," Elena said, her voice steady despite her panic. "I never leave them alone." Linda inspected the house, noting the spotless floors, the stocked diaper bag, the crib in the guest room. "Everything seems in order," she said, but her tone was cautious. The report mentioned prolonged crying and lack of supervision. "We'll need to follow up." Elena's hands shook as she showed Linda out. She knew who was behind this. Evelyn's smug glance from the hallway confirmed it. When Daniel returned that evening, Elena told him about the CPS visit, her voice trembling with anger. "They think I'm neglecting my boys. Someone called them Dr. Harper, and I know it was her." Daniel's face darkened. "Evelyn." He turned to the housekeeper who was setting the dining table. "Did you call CPS?" Evelyn's eyes widened, feigning shock. "Me? Why would I do that? I'm just concerned about the children, sir. They're so young, and Elena's always so busy." Daniel's fists clenched. "Enough, Evelyn. This stops now." But Evelyn held her ground, her voice rising. "I'm only protecting you, Dr. Harper. You don't know what she's capable of." Elena stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "I'm capable of loving my children and doing my job. Unlike you, I don't need to lie to keep it." The room crackled with tension, and Daniel raised a hand for silence. "I'm handling this," he said, his voice firm. "Elena, I'm sorry. I'll get to the bottom of it." That night, Daniel called Klein, the investigator, for an update. "Got something already," Klein said. Evelyn Moore worked at 3 other estates in the Seattle area over the past decade. In 2 of them, younger maids were fired after accusations of theft. Accusations that fell apart when items turned up later. Sound familiar? Daniel's blood ran cold. "She's done this before." "Looks like a pattern," Klein said. "I'm digging into her contacts, including this Marge from the text. I'll have more soon." Daniel hung up, his mind racing. Evelyn wasn't just jealous, she was calculating dangerous. He needed to act, but he couldn't confront her without solid proof. The next morning, he found Elena in the kitchen feeding Noah while Jacob played with a soft toy. "Elena, I have an idea," he said, his voice low. "We need to catch Evelyn in her own game. If she thinks we're fighting, that you're leaving for good, she might let her guard down." Elena's eyes narrowed. "You want me to pretend to leave again?" "I know it's a lot to ask," Daniel said, his gaze earnest. "But Klein's close to proving she's lying. If we stage a fight, make her think she's won, she might slip up, say something we can use." Elena looked at her boys, their innocent faces fueling her resolve. "Okay," she said, "but this is my last shot, Dr. Harper. If it doesn't work, I'm really gone." The plan was set for the next day. Elena packed her bags again, making a show of it in the foyer, while Evelyn watched from the stairs, her expression unreadable. "I can't do this anymore," Elena shouted, her voice echoing through the mansion. "I'm done with your suspicions. Dr. Harper." Daniel played his part, his face a mask of frustration. "Elena, just calm down. We can talk about this." "No," she snapped, pushing the stroller toward the door. "I'm taking my boys and leaving. You don't trust me, so what's the point?" Neighbors peeked from their windows as Elena loaded her bags into a taxi, the twins strapped into their car seats. Evelyn stood at the door, a faint smile tugging at her lips. She thought she'd won, but as the taxi pulled away, Elena glanced back, her heart pounding with determination. She wasn't running, she was fighting. At Julia's apartment, Elena waited, her phone on, ready for Daniel's signal. That evening, he called. "She's relaxed," he said. "She thinks you're gone. I invited her to talk tomorrow. Said, I'm upset about you leaving. I'll record it." Elena nodded, clutching the phone. "Be careful, Dr. Harper." "She's not stupid." The next afternoon, Daniel sat in the living room, a small recorder hidden in his pocket. Evelyn entered, her demeanor softer, almost triumphant. "I'm sorry it came to this, Dr. Harper," she said, sitting across from him. "But maybe it's for the best. That girl wasn't right for this house." Daniel leaned forward, his voice calm. "You really think she took the bracelet?" Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. "I saw her near it, acting strange. You know how these single mothers are desperate, looking for a way out." Daniel's stomach churned, but he kept his tone even. "You're sure you saw her take it? Because the cameras didn't." Evelyn's smile faltered. "Cameras can miss things. I know what I saw." "And the CPS call," Daniel pressed. "Was that you too?" Evelyn's face froze, her hands twisting in her lap. I was worried about those children. They're always crying, left in that stroller." "Stop," Daniel said, his voice hard. "I know about your past, Evelyn. The other maids you got fired. The lies. Where's the bracelet?" Evelyn's eyes widened, panic creeping in. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You took it," Daniel said, standing. "You framed her because you're jealous. Admit it." Evelyn's composure cracked, her voice rising. "Jealous? I've given you 15 years, Daniel. I've kept this house perfect. Been here through everything. And you're throwing it away for some girl with kids." Her words hung in the air, raw and revealing. Daniel's heart sank, not with surprise, but with clarity. "You did this because you're in love with me," he said quietly. Evelyn's face crumpled, tears welling. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted you to see her for what she is. The bracelet's in my room. I hid it to protect you." Daniel pressed the recorder's stop button, his voice cold. "You're done here, Evelyn. Pack your things." As Evelyn stumbled out sobbing, Daniel called Elena. "It's over," he said. She admitted everything. "I'm so sorry. I doubted you." Elena at Julia's felt a weight lift, but fear lingered. "What now?" she asked, rocking Noah. "She's leaving," Daniel said. "Come back, please." Elena looked at her twins, their trusting eyes, and made her choice. "I'll be there tomorrow," she said. But as she hung up, a new worry settled in. Evelyn's confession might end the lies, but her obsession ran deep. Would she really stop? Or was this just the beginning of something worse? 1 year later, the Harper Mansion in Bellevue, Washington, hummed with the warmth of a family transformed. The once sterile halls now echoed with the laughter of Jacob and Noah Elena Torres's twins, who were now 16 months old and toddling through the house with relentless curiosity. Elena, pregnant with her third child, moved through the kitchen with a quiet grace, her hands deftly preparing bottles while humming a lullaby. The morning light streamed through the windows, catching the glow of her engagement ring, a simple band Daniel Harper had slipped onto her finger during the twins' first birthday party 3 months ago. That day, under the sprawling oak tree in the backyard, Daniel had knelt before her, his voice trembling with emotion as he asked her to be his wife. The memory still brought a smile to her face, though it was tinged with the weight of all they'd endured to reach this moment. Evelyn Moore, the former housekeeper, whose jealousy had nearly torn them apart, was gone, serving an 18-month sentence for slander and harassment, after confessing to framing Elena for stealing a silver bracelet. Yet even with Evelyn behind bars, Elena couldn't shake the lingering unease, the sense that their peace was fragile. Daniel now, her fiancé, had become her rock, his trust in her solidified by the truth they'd uncovered together. He was at the hospital now, finishing a surgery, but he'd promised to be home early for a quiet family dinner. Elena glanced at the twins who were playing with wooden blocks on a blanket in the living room, their dark curls bouncing as they babbled to each other. Mama Noah called, holding up a block triumphantly, and Elena's heart swelled. "That's my boy," she said, crossing to kiss his forehead. Jacob, ever the explorer, was already crawling toward the couch, determined to climb it. Life felt full, messy, chaotic, but full in a way Elena had never imagined when she'd first walked through these doors as a desperate single mother. The past year had been a whirlwind of healing and growth. After Evelyn's confession recorded in the living room that fateful day, Daniel had taken swift action. He'd turned the recording over to the police, who arrested Evelyn for falsifying accusations and orchestrating a campaign of slander, including the CPS report that had briefly threatened Elena's custody of her boys. The legal process was grueling court hearing statements and the constant fear that Evelyn might retaliate. But Daniel stood by Elena every step, hiring a lawyer to secure a protective order. The judge, appalled by Evelyn's actions, had been firm: 18 months in prison, no contact with the Harper family. With Evelyn gone, the mansion became a home. Daniel moved Elena and the twins into a spacious suite on the second floor, insisting they were part of his life now. He'd started the adoption process for Jacob and Noah, determined to give them his name, and Elena, overwhelmed by his commitment, had begun to let herself believe in a future together. Their bond grew quietly built on late-night talks over coffee, shared laughter at the twins' antics, and the unspoken understanding that they'd both been alone too long. But the shadow of Evelyn's obsession lingered, a reminder of how quickly trust could be tested. That afternoon, as Elena tidied the kitchen, the doorbell rang. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, assuming it was Julia, her friend, who often dropped by with homemade cookies for the twins. Instead, she opened the door to find a courier holding a plain envelope. "For Elena Torres," he said, handing it over before leaving. Elena frowned, her fingers tracing the unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words typed in neat rows. "Dear Elena, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need to say this. I was wrong about you, about everything. I let my feelings for Daniel twist me into someone I didn't recognize. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you and your boys. I'm out now, starting over in a small town far from Seattle. I won't bother you again. I hope you're happy. You deserve it. Evelyn Moore. Elena's breath caught her hands trembling as she read the letter again. Evelyn free. The thought sent a chill through her, but the words felt sincere, heavy with regret. She tucked the letter into her pocket, unsure whether to tell Daniel. He'd been so protective, so determined to shield her from Evelyn's influence. Would this reopen old wounds? She decided to wait to let the day unfold before stirring that ghost. By evening, Daniel was home, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder as he scooped up Noah, who squealed with delight. "Hey, champ," he said, kissing the boy's cheek before turning to Elena. "You okay? You look distracted." She forced a smile, stirring a pot of pasta. "Just tired. This little one's been kicking all day," she said, patting her belly. Daniel's eyes softened, and he crossed to her, resting a hand on her swollen stomach. "Our girl's gonna be a handful, just like her brothers." Elena laughed, the sound easing her tension. They ate dinner as a family, Jacob smearing sauce on his high-chair tray, while Noah tried to mimic Daniel's gestures, dropping his spoon with a giggle. After the twins were bathed and tucked into bed, Elena and Daniel sat on the couch, the letter burning a hole in her pocket. "Daniel," she said, finally pulling it out. "This came today." He read it in silence, his jaw tightening. "She's out," he said, his voice low. "And she thinks a letter fixes everything." Elena touched his arm. "Maybe she's trying to change. People, can you know?" Daniel's eyes met hers, searching. "You're too kind, Elena. After everything she did, locking you in that room, calling CPS, spreading lies?" "I know," Elena said, her voice steady. "But holding on to anger doesn't help us. It doesn't help our family." Daniel exhaled, pulling her close. "You're right. I can't stand the thought of her hurting you again." Elena nestled against him, her heart full. "She won't. We're stronger than that." The next week was the twins' first birthday, a milestone Elena had once feared they'd never reach together. The backyard was transformed with balloons and a small bounce house, a modest celebration for family and friends. Julia arrived with her famous cookies, and Daniel's sister Claire brought gifts for the boys. Jacob and Noah, dressed in tiny bow ties, toddled through the grass, chasing bubbles and squealing. Elena, now 6 months pregnant, watched from a lawn chair, her heart swelling as Daniel lifted Noah onto his shoulders, pointing at a passing butterfly. The moment felt perfect, but she couldn't shake the weight of Evelyn's letter. She'd kept it hidden in a drawer, rereading it late at night, wondering if forgiveness was possible or wise. As the party wound down, Daniel led Elena to the oak tree where he'd proposed. "One more surprise," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a key not to a car or a house, but to his office safe. "This is where I keep everything important. Documents, cash, my parents' keepsakes," he said, his voice low. "I'm giving it to you. Not because I doubt you, but because I trust you completely. You're my family, Elena. You and the boys, and soon our little girl." Tears welled in Elena's eyes as she took the key, its weight heavy with meaning. "Daniel, I don't know what to say." He smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Say you'll stay. Say we'll build this life together no matter what comes." She nodded, her voice choked. "I will. We will." Months later, their daughter Lily was born, a tiny girl with Elena's dark eyes and Daniel's stubborn chin. The twins, now walking and babbling words like Mama and Dada, were obsessed with their sister patting her gently as she slept in her crib. The mansion was alive with their chaos, spilled cereal, scattered toys, and endless laughter. Elena and Daniel married in a quiet ceremony in the backyard, the twins waddling ahead heel with handfuls of rose petals, most of which ended up in their mouths. As they exchanged vows, Elena thought of her journey from a terrified single mother locked in a storage room with her babies to this moment surrounded by love. She thought of Evelyn, too, somewhere far away, starting over. The letter had been a turning point not just for Evelyn, but for Elena. It reminded her that love wasn't about control or possession, but about letting go of anger, of fear of the past. She'd chosen to let go to focus on the family she'd built, and in doing so, she'd found peace. Across the state in a small town near Spokane, Evelyn Moore sat in a modest apartment, a newspaper open on her table. She'd taken a job as a clerk at a local library, a quiet life far from the grandeur of the Harper mansion. The article in front of her was about Daniel and Elena's wedding, a small notice with a photo of them smiling, the twins on their hips, a new baby on the way. Evelyn's fingers traced the image, her eyes soft with regret. She'd spent 15 years loving Daniel in silence, letting that love twist into something dark, something that hurt innocent people. In prison, therapy had forced her to face it, the obsession, the lies, the pain she'd caused. She'd written the letter to Elena, not expecting forgiveness, but needing to release the weight of her guilt. Now, as she folded the newspaper, she whispered, "Be happy." It wasn't absolution, but it was a start. Love, she'd learned, wasn't about holding on. It was about setting free even when it hurt. For the first time, she felt ready to do just that, to build a life not defined by what she'd lost, but by what she could become. Back in Bellevue, Elena stood in the nursery, rocking Lily as the twins slept nearby. Daniel joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Look at us," he said, his voice warm. A surgeon, a former housekeeper, and 3 perfect kids. "Who'd have thought?" Elena smiled, leaning into him. "I did. Somewhere deep down I knew we'd make it." She thought of Evelyn's letter, of the woman who'd tried to tear them apart, and felt a quiet compassion. "Everyone deserves a chance to start over," she said softly, her eyes on Lily. "Even her." Daniel kissed her forehead, his voice a whisper. "That's why I love you. You see the good even after everything." They stood there, surrounded by their children's soft breaths, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them together. Their family, forged in trust and tested by fire, was unbreakable, not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs.